Okay, today we're going to be talking about how to measure a pocket watch. First, I'd like to mention that you do not measure the case. When somebody refers to a pocket watch being a 16S, if you see this in an eBay listing or other place, that information is not derived by the size of the case. Okay, that has nothing to do with it. How do we measure a watch? The watch is the internals that goes into the watch case. Okay. These are the popular size pocket watches. The 18S is this size. 16S is this size. I don't have a 14S right now. 12S is that size. 0S is this size. That's a women's pocket watch. And this here is a 36S clock. It's not really called a clock per se, but it's not called a pocket watch either. It's called a chronometer, and these would be on your Navy ships during World War II. Okay, so this is made in about 1944. Okay, let's go over how you determine what, and by the way, this is not a complete list by any means. There's a 20S, for example. This is not a complete list. I just went over some of the more common sizes. Once you get below a 0S, then it goes 3/0 to make it, these get smaller and smaller. This I should have written above the 18S because this watch here is a 36S. Okay, alright, once again, how do you measure one of these? The measurement of a pocket watch is the plate, the movement plate that is mounted to the dial. Many times the only thing that connects the dial to the movement plate is the hands and just maybe very little ounce, okay? But that is the measure. I'm going to draw here. Here is the dial. Underneath the dial, slightly smaller, and I'm not an artist, as you can tell, but the movement plate is slightly smaller than the dial. Okay, let's go ahead and look at this particular watch. I'm gonna do something, then I'll explain why I do this. This is technically not the correct way of measuring this watch, but I'm going to share with you why I'm doing this to this particular watch. This one comes up to about 45.1, 45.2 millimeters. Notice our chart here. It's an 18S 44.86. So this watch is a parts watch. It's a no-name watch. It doesn't have hardly any value. If this were a good watch, I wouldn't be putting my chronometer up against the dial. I would probably put a little piece of plastic on either side or a piece of tape or something to protect the dial. You never want to scratch those. So what we did is we came up with a measurement of a 45.1, 45.2. Notice that this number here is slightly smaller. Why? Because the movement plate is smaller than the dial. This gets you close enough, doesn't it? You know it's not a 16S, and once you have a little bit of experience, you would know that there would never be a 20S. You know it's an 18S by just doing that. Now the reason why many times when I'm measuring a pocket watch, I measure it the size of the dial is for this reason. I don't want to remove the watch from the case. Too many things can go wrong. I could lose a screw, I could scratch a screw, I could scratch the movement, I could accidentally damage the movement, I could damage the winding mechanism, and so forth. So what we can do to avoid all that is to measure the dial of the watch. Okay, let's go ahead and look at another example. Let's go ahead and look at this South Bend watch here. That's the name of the watch. This happens to be a 16S. I already know that. But how do we get to that information? How do we know that information? Well, many watch brands, I've already loosened this, watches, not all watches, this one certainly didn't. This one didn't have a name brand on it and didn't have a movement number on it. So this one I had to measure in order to determine the size of the watch. Notice here with this South Bend watch, there's a movement number right here. Not to be confused with the case. This information, this number here will give you no information concerning the watch. It just gives you information concerning the case. This is the watch, and then of course the rest of this is the watch case. When you type that number into a database, like I would type in South Bend watch numbers, then type that number into that website, it'll tell you everything you need to know about this watch. It'll tell you when it was made, it'll tell you that it's a 16S, it'll tell you how many adjustments it has, it'll tell you how many jewels it has, and it'll give you much more information than just that. So based upon that information, I know that's a 16S. But let's say I didn't have access to a database. Okay. What I'm doing is I'm going to unscrew the top of the case. Notice I said unscrew it. You don't pop these off with a knife. They unscrew counterclockwise. You'll damage the case greatly and reduce the value of the watch if you pop these off with a knife. They unscrew. Okay, so here we have it. Here's the South Bend pocket watch, of course. What I'm going to do is I'm going to get a measurement of this, and I'm going to try to do so without really touching that dial. Alright, that should be close enough. I think it's... I might just... okay, that's close enough. So let's see, what's the measurement on this? It's 43 point something millimeters. Okay, about 43.5 millimeters. These micrometers you can get on eBay or at Home Depot or Lowe's hardware stores. Calipers or micrometers. So the measurement I get is about 43.5 millimeters. Let's go ahead and look at our piece of paper here. Which one does that correspond to closest? We know that the plate is always or almost always smaller than the dial. We measured the dial at 44.5 millimeters across. So we're looking for a number that's slightly smaller than that. Here it is, not 44.5, it would be 43.18. Why? Because it's slightly smaller. So this method not only applies to these two watches, it would apply to a little watch like this. By the way, we have this one, and this one listed on eBay. Okay, so to measure the size of this watch, okay. On this one, I'm getting a measurement of 30 millimeters, and that's where we're at, 0S. On this Waltham here, you do have the benefit of once again having a movement number. You type that number into the Waltham numbers site, and it'll tell you that's a 0S, so you don't really have to measure it. The same is true with this watch here. I'm not, unless it comes off easy, I'm not going to mess with that, but even with a really big watch like this, you would measure it out, and then it would tell you what size it is. But being a Hamilton, it has a number on the back of it. It's a size 36S at 60.11 millimeters is the movement size. And if you want more information on that Hamilton watch, just in case you're curious about it, it's a Hamilton Model 22 Navy watch used on the ships during World War II. Well, I guess that's about it for this video. I hope that it was helpful. When you are doing it, measuring watches, you have to be really careful not to scratch the dial. You have to be really careful when you take the case apart on a watch that you twist it off. You don't pop it off. Notice how this watch has a hinge on it. So obviously if it has a hinge, notice how it has this little ear here, or a little tab. See? Some watches you do they do have a pop-off lid, but it's very rare for antique watches. Almost all of them are twist off, or you pop the tab with your thumbnail. So when you're doing this, please don't scratch the dial of the watch. It would be horrible to do that. Don't chip it, don't do anything. If you're nervous about it, which is understandable, put a little piece of plastic on either side and very carefully measure. In fact, you don't even have to touch it. You can get a really good idea. Notice what I mean here. There's enough gap between these numbers here. For example, if you don't know if a watch is 16S or 18S, you just take a fairly rough measurement of it with a micrometer, and you can tell what it is. It doesn't have to be extremely exact. Okay, so be careful of the dial, be careful of the case. When you're putting back on a watch case, make sure it turns on real easy. That's not lopsided on it. It turns on real smooth when it's going back on. Okay, I guess that's about it. I hope that this was helpful. I would like to mention my wife and I are Christians, and all of our videos are family friendly, Christian friendly, and Republican friendly. There's no socialism, communism, immoral filth in any of our videos, so they're safe for the whole family to enjoy. Well, thank you for watching, and have a good night.